Hello everyone. Now, in my last video, if I remember correctly, I was talking about autism. Yeah, another trait of autism. And because of that, today the plan was to talk about another psychiatric condition associated with ADHD. However, I'm postponing that plan until the next video, which will be tomorrow, because instead today, rather unexpectedly but very pleasantly, I've had a spontaneous conversation with someone in the comment section on my video addressing ADHD and dysthymic disorder that I found very, very interesting and very, very informative. Now, and I really, really appreciate it. Just so you know, like if you're the person who was having that conversation with me, then I just want to say I genuinely appreciate everything that you put in that comment section, and I sympathize actually with a lot of what you said. So perhaps I should see if I have DD. I don't know, but anyway. So I just wanted to use this video to pay a sort of reference or respect to all the information that I gained. Now, I think I mentioned in my ADHD and dysthymic disorder video that I'm not diagnosed with it, right? And it was something that I'd recently become aware of because of ADHD, an ADHD group I was attending, just so I could like get better information. To be honest, it was very helpful because there's a lot of information that I hadn't even been aware of. Now, and it, like I said, very helpful. Anyway, essentially this person I was having a conversation with was trying to explain why it's very confusing and difficult to live with both ADHD and DD, simply because of its similarities where it shares characteristics or symptoms, but then also mostly because of the parts of both disorders that differ, you know, that carry conflicting symptoms. For example, ADHD's hyperactivity, it's energy, and DD's being low of mood and having low energy, which can be very conflicting in one person because in general, people who are neurodivergent find it very, very difficult to express themselves and very difficult to understand themselves, especially how they're thinking or feeling. So if you have two conflicting conditions that are that adverse to each other, that can be very, very, very difficult, and in fact damaging on your mental health and on your psyche. It can make you feel even worse, perhaps. So in my case, I have been depressed before. And when I was, a large part of the issue wasn't just what had made me depressed, it was the way I was dealing with it, which at the time I thought made sense, but really wasn't good for the long term. I would pretend to be happy because that's what I thought people expected of me. I'd pretend to be more energetic than I actually felt. I'd pretend to be more excitable, more eccentric, more bubbly than I actually was feeling. And it hurt because forcing yourself to do that all the time simply because you feel like that's what you need to do for other people, you're putting your own well-being basically on the back burner, and that's not good. That can feel very upsetting. That can feel very, very conflicting. In fact, talking about it now, my eyes feel, I don't know if they come across, but my eyes are starting to feel warm, which, you know, is that warning like you're about to cry, but don't worry, I won't, I'm good. Anyway, it can just feel very detrimental, essentially, because what you want to do instinctively is you want to cry, or you want to scream, or you want to just lay down and rest. You want to do something like that, but you feel like you can't because you don't want people to worry about you. At least that's what it was like for me. So and the thing is, though, you need to lean on people. You need to let them know how you're feeling, because in the long term, if you're doing, I've said in a video very recently actually about taking care of yourself so you can take care of other people. If you are always letting yourself suffer because you feel like you need to not make people worry, well, think about it in the long term, because eventually that's going to catch up with you. Whether you think it is or not, it will, and it'll start overflowing. It happens to me all the time these days, and I'm using methods all the time to like manage it. But when that happens, the people around you who you didn't want to worry, they're going to worry anyway, because they won't know where it's coming from. They won't know why you're that emotional. If you're neurodivergent, they might, and they understand the whatever it is you have, ADHD, autism, DD, anything else, depression, yeah, then they might just make the assumption it's just a byproduct of that, when there's more to it. So it's very important to, well, basically be vulnerable, let yourself be vulnerable, and talk to people. And also, in reference to the conversation I had today, one thing that came up as well was a worry, and I think they worded it very, very well, actually, because I made a comment about masking when they said about basically pretending or paying attention to people's expressions and their reactions, so it's easier to pretend. And I was like, that sounds a lot like masking, which I've also done a video on if you're interested. I made a comment that that's usually associated with autism, and then they replied with saying, oh, I know, and mentioning that a friend who's autistic could sympathize, could understand what they were talking about. So, and then there was this worry, they said basically, like, they know it won't change, if they got diagnosed with autism, they know it won't change a thing about them. They're still exactly the same person, but their brain is telling them that they won't be able to deal with diagnosis. And I've mentioned, and I've actually addressed this in a previous video as well. For me as a kid, it was a little different, you know, it was just a word. I knew instinctively it didn't change anything about me. As I grew up, it was because of the misconceptions the society, the people around me were putting on me that started to make the difficulties worse, because it started to make me feel like there was something wrong with me, when before I didn't feel that way. And I can totally understand that it can feel like you're not going to deal, but you have, it's so much easier said than done. Trust me, I understand every piece of advice I say in these videos, every piece of information I relay, you know, whether you can sympathize with it or not. I totally understand that it's so much easier said than done. But, and putting these methods into practice, into getting into a better mental state, into getting into the frame of mind where you can tell yourself or remind yourself, no, you are still exactly the same person. Or if you're feeling depressed, you're not alone, because that's a very common thing to think when you're feeling low, that you're alone, but you're not. Yeah, that is a fact. You are not alone. Yeah. But putting those methods into practice is very, very difficult. And I think sometimes people are so desperate to feel happier, to feel better, to feel like almost like they're cured, when you shouldn't be thinking about being cured. You should just think about how you can help yourself, you know, and how you can help the people around you help you. And they get so desperate with that they start thinking, oh, that they start kind of, how do I put this into words? See, I'm struggling to express myself. That they start thinking they need to get over it now. Yeah, and it's like if someone says to you, think positively. That can feel very annoying if you're feeling low, you know? You're like, oh yeah, it's not that easy. And no, it's not. But it's not impossible. Something being difficult or being challenging does not make it an impossibility, because it can still happen. It's just dependent on you as an individual finding that method you need to pick yourself up, yeah, to get into that better frame of mind, and remind yourself that you are perfect just as you are. And I think that's the trick, and that's just what I wanted to say in reference to that conversation, because it made me think, it made me, again, it was very informative. In fact, I really appreciate it to you who made all those comments and stuff and had that little conversation with me. So, and also, just so you know, they were right. They also said that dysthymic disorder is one that hasn't been talked about, hasn't had much awareness raised about it. But I feel like the more I learn about it, the more I'm thinking, no, it needs more awareness. Each and every one of these, not just ADHD and autism, need more awareness, because they all affect people differently. And if you have ADHD or autism and one of those other psychiatric conditions, then it's going to affect you in different ways. And it's very important for people to realize how these combinations work. Anyway, I think that's all I wanted to say on this. And again, thank you to that person. Now, if you like this video and you like my content, then please follow me, leave a comment, requests for future videos in the comments, any questions you have, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're interested, and repost the video, just because, again, helping raise awareness. It also makes me feel great. You know, I'm not going to deny that. Anyway, until then, take care of yourself. Have a great day. Bye.